we're going to talk about the structure of the organization's leadership. One of the things that we are, of course, have is a board of directors, much like yourselves. Our board is actually comprised of community members as well as members from, there we go, as well as member programs. So there are standing committees for the board of directors. Of course, we have our executive committee, which is comprised of our board chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. We have a finance committee, a board development committee. Board development looks not only at those recruitment for the board, but also training and ongoing education for the board members. Our public policy committee is a fairly large committee. It's comprised of almost 50 people that are weighing in during our legislative process. Jennifer Carter-Dockler, who you happen to see on screen as well, she was not anticipating I was going to call her out. But Jennifer and Colleen Coble, our CEO, are leadership for our public policy committee. So during the legislative session, they get action alerts and weigh in on different questions that we have about legislative efforts. And yeah, I'm really stammering. I must be really nervous. Sorry about that. And then finally is our membership committee. Our membership committee is actually comprised of those that you elected to represent you. So at the end of each year, you get a slate of folks to nominate to the board and to vote into office there. So they have their own leadership program, and they always, wow, I am really nervous. Y'all are like, sorry about that.
You're doing great, Cheryl.
Regaining composure. So yes, you also have 7 regional liaisons. And so you see those at your regional meetings, and those are elected by you at the end of each year. I think probably because I'm struggling because my button doesn't work, Matthew. So if you can advance the slide for me.
There we go.
So much. Okay. So on your board this year, we have Molly Jones as our chair, and she is with BEAR. She's one of our community members. Other community members are Brendan Cosette, who is our vice chair. He's with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. Julie Donnellan is with MOXA in Kansas City and is a program member and our treasurer on our board. Susan Miller is secretary and is the CEO at Rosebrook Center. Ian Chang is with Providence Bank in Columbia and is a community member who's new to our board this year. Cynthia Copeland is the Assistant Director of Title IX Office at Washington University. Jessica Hill, another program member, is the Director with Safe House for Women in Cape Girardeau. Jeremy LaFavor is one of our community members with State Line Strategies in Kansas City. Phyllis Miller, Director with YW in St. Louis. And finally, Zora Mulligan, who is the Commissioner of Higher Education. We'd like to thank Zora in particular for her service this past 3-year term. She is retiring off the board this year. And so the newly elected member who's going to be joining us for our 2020 term is going to be Jessica Woolbright from St. Martha's Hall in St. Louis. So moving straight into our financials, we're going to be talking about 2018 because that's our last audited financials as opposed to 2019. Our fiscal year is a calendar year, so we start in January and we haven't completed our 2019 yet. So our fiscal year audit was performed by a local firm, Williams Keepers, and it was yet another year of an unqualified audit, which in audit terms means that we did really good. Our finance team is made up of Paula Richard, our finance director, myself, Natalie Smith is our office manager, and Zach Wilson, our operations director. So we work as a team to manage financial comings and goings within the organization. Our fiscal year 2018 budget was $2.6 million, and the net worth at the end of 2018 was $1.1 million. Okay. One other thing I forgot to mention about our 2018 audit was that with it, we also were required to do an A133 or a single point audit. As some of you may be well aware that if you receive federal funds more than $750,000, you're required by the federal government to provide a single point audit. Our audited section was on our VOCA funds. So they took an intensive look at that to make sure that we were doing everything that we were supposed to be doing by standard auditing procedures. So thankfully, that went well as well. So to talk about the breakdown of our 2018 budget, As many of you do, you know the importance of figuring out what percentage of expenditures you're doing, because a lot of, especially private funders, are very curious about how you're spending your funds. So here you see a pie chart that describes where the majority of our funding went, which was to programming. So 89% of our funds went towards our education programs, our training programs, the services basically that we provide to you all and outside of the organization, to our community members as well. 10% was spent in management in general. So sort of the things that happen to keep the four walls of the organization standing, took us about 10% of our budget. And then 1% of our budget was fundraising. I'm just going to do a dramatic pause so Matthew knows when I need the button clicked, because mine still aren't working. So talking about this year's financials, because obviously we're coming to the close of this year's fiscal year. This year we had a reduced budget compared to the prior years, so we were looking at $2.1 million. Most recent projection of our percentage of budget spent is going to be about 83% as of the end of October. So we're running pretty much on schedule and on course for where our budget expectations were. Approximate amount of reserves on hand is 3 months.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate you going over our board structure as well as our financials. Those are two areas of the organization that I really do not work on at all, and I appreciate you speaking very eloquently about them.
Well, once I was done stammering around, I'm glad I could get my act together, so thank you.
And as we have learned, it would never be a meeting or a training without some sort of technology issue. So glad to see that today we are right on track with that as well.
Exactly.
So shifting a little bit to talk about our 2019 membership committee. I wanted to recognize all of the people we had serving on membership committee this year. And so starting with Jessica Hill, the committee chair. She is the director of Safe House for Women in Cape Girardeau. We also have Jessica Woolbright, who served as the committee vice chair from St. Martha's Hall in St. Louis. Then from other regions around the state, we have Sharon Alexander of Legal Services of Southern Missouri in Springfield, Corey Claxton Miller from Russell House in Rolla, Melissa Eskew from Safe Passage in Moberly, Ann Gosnell from Hope House Incorporated in Lexington. Not Hope House, House of Hope. Sorry about that. Laura Halfman Morris, Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. Julian Hutchins, Turning Point in Warrenton. Kim Kempf, YWCA in St. Joseph. Vicki Kraft, Newhouse in Kansas City. Megan Cosman, Children and Family Center of Northwest Missouri in Maryville. Dr. Stephanie Logan of Deaf Lead in Columbia. Victoria Pickering of Moxa in Kansas City, Sunny Roberts from the Crisis Center of Taney County in Branson, and Eileen Sheehan of Hope House in Kansas City. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize our retiring members. These are folks who have served two-year terms on our membership committee, and those people are Jessica Hill, Corey Claxton Miller, Melissa Eskew, Kim Kempf, Vicki Kraft, and Sunny Roberts. So again, I wanted to make a point to thank them for their service on membership committee. Now looking at our membership committee regional liaisons, I wanted to take a point just to talk about the important role that our regional liaisons play for the coalition. So regional liaisons are assigned by the membership committee chair to represent each of MCADSV's 7 membership regions. Regional liaisons are responsible for conveying information from and to the membership's regional meetings that affect the interests of the coalition at large, as well as our member agencies. And regional liaisons also assist MCADSV staff to coordinate regional meetings by helping to secure locations, encouraging full attendance and participation from other member agencies and advocates. And so we want to thank them for all of the work that they do for their region and for the coalition as a whole. A couple of highlights from the membership committee this year. The 2019 Membership Committee provided staff with guidance on training topics, as well as public policy implementation through their reports at regional meetings. And this guidance resulted in a few really specific things that we wanted to pull out and lift up from those efforts. One is that we found that many folks serving on the Membership Committee had talked about some of the organizational dynamics of more staff being hired and advocates being moved into mid-level manager positions. And so with that came a need for having multiple roundtable discussions about what it is to be a new manager, to equip people with the skills of being a new manager, and also to build community among the folks who are those new managers. Those regional meeting roundtables were held by Laura Zond, as well as Zach Wilson, and there came to be great benefit of bringing that community of people together. Another thing that came out of Membership Committee was a discussion that advocates really needed to be able to dig into the conversation of what are the ethical standards of our work as advocates. And so our member services specialist, Heidi Coleman, who has a master's in social work, really led folks on a discussion earlier this month on another Zoom call on ethical crossroads. Which way do I go, and how do we incorporate ethical decision-making into our work? So again, I want to thank our Membership Committee for the work that they did on bringing these issues up onto the statewide level and helping the staff of the coalition address the needs of members. So I'm now going to shift gears a bit and begin talking about some of the updates of MCADSV's 4 core service areas. And we're going to start with public policy. So this quote by Walter Elliott is a reminder that public policy is a team sport, and it requires shared leadership, unified advocacy, patience, and persistence. And we know that the Missouri legislative session is 5 months out of the year, but that our collective efforts are year-round, and that they focus not only on how a bill becomes law, but how those laws affect the everyday lives of survivors and their families. So to lift up a couple of the highlights from this year, we had a big legislative success in housing rights. And something that we know to be true is that advocates and survivors consistently identify housing as a primary need. And so this statute, which was passed as House Bills 243 and 544, allows for lease termination and additional housing rights to victims of domestic and sexual violence. And it really helps to close the gap between some of the limited federal housing protections and then the municipal housing ordinances that we saw being passed. So we were very proud to see this legislation make it all the way through this session. I also want to give a highlight from appropriations. So this year we were able to secure an increased spending authority for the Victims of Crime Act funding that we see coming into our state. With that increased authority, we saw a lot of excitement from member agencies, and we also saw that with more money can sometimes come more problems and frustrations in terms of it being administered. And so I also want to give credit to the more than 75 member agencies that participated in the VOCA pre-bid and stakeholder meetings. It is with your unified advocacy with us at the coalition that not only were we able to get this increase in spending authority, but really help to guide where and how these funds go. And so we greatly appreciate that unified advocacy in 2019, as well as carrying it on through into 2020. To highlight a couple portions of the systems change work that we engaged in this year. So one, MCADSV staff and representatives from member agencies served on the Attorney General's Safe Kit Multidisciplinary Group. That group met quarterly to track the progress of the overall project, as well as provide recommendations for next steps. One of the big announcements that we saw come out earlier this year were the results of the statewide Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. One of the most notable things that we found in that is that more than 7,000 sexual assault forensic kits were located. That was a process of the Attorney General's office doing an inventory and an audit of identifying where these sexual assault kits were. So recognizing that there was a process of some of them still being stored at hospitals, some being with local law enforcement, but really identifying where all of these kits were in the state helped us to have a better foundation to build this statewide infrastructure for a coordinated response to sexual violence in our state. So we certainly want to thank those ongoing efforts of our work with the Attorney General's office, as well as the folks from member agencies who also serve on that group. Additionally, I wanted to highlight the work that MCADSV staff and representatives from other member agencies have done in serving on the Supreme Court Human Trafficking and Domestic Violence Commission. We were proud to be tapped to serve on that, along with other individuals from member agencies. And you can see that one of the big outcomes from that work over the last year was working with the Center for Court Innovation from New York to evaluate our statewide court system response for survivors. These are two examples of how the coalition works on a statewide level to improve systems response and systems change on behalf of survivors and their families, and also for the advocates working at member agencies who provide those life-saving and life-changing services every day. To now talk a bit about our media and public policy advocacy. This is something that Jennifer Carter-Dockler, our public policy director, and myself have really worked on increasing and bolstering over the last couple of years. And so in 2019, we really increased our media advocacy, both in terms of traditional media, working with journalists in print, television, and radio, as well as social media. So really moving a lot of our efforts on our social media platforms. We use those efforts to support our mission and really help build more momentum and mobilization around those public policy efforts. So on Twitter, we saw over 3,000 followers engage with us during the Capitol Advocacy Days that we hold in February, as well as during legislative session. And so I do want to encourage folks who might not be connected with us on Twitter to follow us at MCADSV. This will allow you to get real-time updates during the legislative session. Jennifer works very hard to be able to provide up-to-date and real-time information to folks. And that benefits us because it allows both MCADSV and member agencies to interact with legislative staffers and media to really get our message out to a much wider audience. We also saw in 2019 that our Facebook followers increased to over 4,000, and that posts during legislative session reached more than 23,000 individuals. We work really hard to increase our reach, not only during legislative session, but year-round, to support our mission and also to support the advocates working at member programs. So we want to thank everyone who does follow us on social media, and if you aren't, to encourage you to follow us and really help us in our effort to create a larger reach for these efforts. Moving on to our core service area of Alliance. This year, MCADSV was selected to participate in the Missouri Foundation for Health's 5-year exemplary advocate cohort with 11 other advocacy organizations in the state of Missouri. This 5-year project has been given the charge of changing the field of advocacy in our state. So recognizing how we can begin to coordinate all of our efforts, regardless of the specific advocacy issue or initiative you're working on, but that we are much stronger together in the advocacy field. And so how can we start to really build and bolster our efforts? I also want to highlight that this year we brought together 24 advocates and allied professionals for our Immigrant and Refugee Services Roundtable. We have this every year, and we were very excited this year to be able to welcome individuals from the Mexican Consulate of Kansas City to present a training for everyone. We also brought together 43 advocates of color from member agencies for 2 people of color gatherings. We have started holding these to really recognize the intersection of violence and oppression and how we have to have concerted efforts to work on both at the same time. And so the people of color gatherings have been coordinated by our member services specialist, Dara Kennedy, as well as several other agency representatives from member programs. And that work is to really lift up the voices of advocates and survivors of color and center our work on those efforts as well. Moving over to another core service area of education. In 2019, we kind of redesigned the way that we were holding our education events and trainings. And so our newly redesigned Foundations of Advocacy series, as well as Advocacy in Practice, saw multiple advocates attend and feel energized at the end of those trainings to go back and make change happen in their communities. So with the 8 events of our Foundations of Advocacy, we were able to train 172 advocates. With Advocacy in Practice, we held 9 events and saw 233 advocates trained. In many of our other statewide series, statewide training events that were held outside of the Foundations and Advocacy trainings, we held 12 events and saw 305 advocates trained. In our leadership series, we held 11 events and saw 311 advocates attend and were trained on leadership and administrative topics. Staff worked with our regional liaisons to coordinate 31 regional meetings with 533 advocates attending those throughout the year. We had 1,737 advocates participate in our online training, which we are very happy to say that we were able to expand out more this year with our technology. And we're very excited to be able to offer those to members as well. MCADSV staff answered 2,828 requests for technical assistance from member agencies and advocates who are requesting problem solving, assistance, and support from MCADSV staff. Also highlighting that a big part of our work at MCADSV is to educate the broader population of Missouri, as well as our national partners and allies. And we held 33 community trainings this year and saw 1,214 community members trained on issues related to domestic and sexual violence, stalking, prevention, organizational change and management, and we're very proud to be able to bring more people into this work. And then with our last core service area of research, MCADSV distributed more than 37,000 publications to member agencies, policymakers, and the general public in 2019. And a few things to highlight there that we're especially proud of. We had more than 13,000 domestic and sexual violence 101 publications printed, 1,487 service standards. Service standards are actually created with input from MCADSV member agencies, and it's a way of bringing consistency in the services provided to survivors. And we want to thank all of the people who participate in not only creating those from the beginning, but who continue to play a vital role in keeping our service standards up to date. We saw more than 2,000 of our MCADSV member program service statistics distributed. Our service statistics are gathered from the monthly service reports provided by MCADSV member agencies, as well as some other funded agencies. It's incredibly important for folks to participate in providing us with that data. We use that in our public policy efforts, both in the Missouri Capitol and at our federal capital in DC, when we are advocating on behalf of programs to make sure that you all have the resources and funding you need to continue to provide these life-saving and life-changing services. We also produced 500 annual reports and then 1,760 public policy documents, as well as over 16,000 training and technical assistance publications. Again, this is an area of MCADSV's core services that we are really proud to be able to offer, not only to member agencies, but to the broader audience. And lastly, I want to say thank you. Your coalition thanks you for the life-saving, life-changing work you do every day. I want to thank you on behalf of all the staff at MCADSV, and also to quote Colleen, our CEO, onward. We accomplished great things in 2019, and I look forward to what we can accomplish together in 2020. So I'm now going to open it back up and unmute everyone for any questions.
Hi, this is Julie Donnellan with MOXA. I just wanted to say thank you to MCADSV for all the work and support that you provide to the programs, member programs throughout Missouri. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, and thank you, Julie. And thank you for your service on our board as well.
My pleasure.
So I do want to say, along with unmuting everyone's lines, if you don't necessarily want to hear your voice or have it recorded, you also have the chat option. And so if you would rather ask a question or make a statement via chat, you also have that option. All right. Well, not necessarily see, oh, I do see a comment from Rachel Carter asking if we could share the PowerPoint so that we can share it with other staff who weren't able to attend today. So Rachel, we can do that. I can absolutely send you this PowerPoint. And then once again, I do want to say that we will make this available. So I'm recording today's meeting. We will put it up on our YouTube channel. And so then folks who weren't able to attend can actually hear the presentation as well. So we will make sure that all of our members have access to that. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Well, not seeing any, I want to close by saying thank you to everyone who was able to join us for this today. And once again, saying thank you to all of the advocates at member agencies for the work that you do. I want to wish you all a happy holiday, a happy 2019, and a happy 2020. Onward.
Thanks.